Hello there, and welcome to another Frankiesense&More. It is March, the end of March, March 30th, and we are going to do some reviews and some updates for you on the movies of this past month that Brent saw.
That sounds good to me.
All right. Well, let's take it. Some really good ones, actually. So let's just take it away.
So it's good to see everybody once again. Right now, we're in between movie seasons. We just had award season ending, and we got summer movie blockbuster season starting in about a month. So we're at a time when the pickings are a little bit slim. However, the one thing that is always kind of good about this time of year is that it's a really good period in which to check out some of the movies that are a little bit slow to release generally, and that usually involves documentaries and foreign films. So that's what we're going to be focusing on exclusively today, because those are really the best things that are out there right now. So for starters, we have a documentary that was nominated for Best Documentary Feature at the Oscars, and it's called All That Breathes. And this is an absolutely beautiful film that tells the story of two brothers in New Delhi who run a bird rescue service for those that are injured and suffering from the ill effects of the air quality in the city, which is apparently so bad that the birds will sometimes just drop out of the sky because their lungs are so contaminated.
These are called kites, these birds.
Yes, black kites. And they're there in fairly large numbers, and they also serve a very valuable purpose in terms of being an integral part of the ecosystem for helping to eat some of the vermin and so forth that run the streets there. This is a real story of commitment. These brothers have been doing this since 2003. They had a colleague who joined them in 2017, so it's really the three of them that are working it these days. And in that time, they saved 20,000 birds. And it's just amazing in terms of the level of commitment that they have to their work. They've essentially converted a large portion of the building that they live in as a bird hospital. And just seeing the level of commitment, care, nurturing, love that they bring to this is so inspiring and astounding.
It is, and they're self-taught veterinaries. They're self-taught.
Yes.
So there's no program for aviary veterinary medicine in India, and they self-taught. I mean, it's absolutely amazing, the love that and the just the respect that they have for the bird and the way that they hold them, and you can see like they just care.
And also the lengths that they'll sometimes go to rescue birds that are apparently ill or injured, like crossing bodies of water to take the birds, from the position where they're trapped and take them back to the animal hospital so that they can take care of them, nurture them back to health. This is a really wonderful film in so many respects. Absolutely gorgeously filmed, especially the close-ups of the birds are just stunning.
Yeah.
I mean, really just beautiful cinematography. But most importantly, I think that one of the messages of this film is it shows that we're all connected, man and animal, and that we need to have a mutual respect for everybody and everything that resides within our environment, because we all really ultimately depend upon one another in the long run.
Absolutely.
And in a city that's really beset by so many problems, from environmental quality to growing levels of civil unrest, one might think, well, who cares about the birds at a time like this? But they do, and they make it work, and they make sure that our feathered friends get the care that they deserve, because we would certainly think that if a human suffered those kinds of injuries, of course we should get it. Well, they figure, why not with them too?
Yeah. And you think about it, if a bird is falling out of the sky due to pollution, what is it happening down on the ground? When are we going to fall down?
Yes.
Pollution.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it was in 2014, the World Health Organization declared that New Delhi had the worst air quality on the planet.
Yeah.
And it's really pretty astounding, given the fact that this is the world's second largest metropolitan area.
Yeah.
11 million in the city and 17 million more in the surrounding area. So it's a pretty concentrated group of people.
I think it was interesting too that when the first time he went to get a bird help, they didn't want to do it because it was a carnivore, you know, and it was a predator bird, and probably more that it was a predator bird. But, you know, I know here when the eagles had a problem with the environment, because they eat the fish and they eat animals on the land, they really noticed the environment, how the environment affects people too, because they were dying and getting sick from the ocean and getting sick from the land. And
absolutely,
that's a real problem for all of us.
Absolutely. I mean, this movie really draws attention to a lot of issues, more than just the birds themselves, to help make us aware that if we're going to really protect our planet, we better get serious about it and do it. And that includes doing things that you might not necessarily think are the most immediately pressing issues, but that have an impact nevertheless.
Yeah.
And I was really glad to see this film receive the widespread attention that it did. It certainly helped with all the awards nominations that it received. I mean, it got a lot of attention, and it's available now for streaming on the HBO Max streaming service. So it's something that's pretty easy to access at this point.
Yeah.
And for its efforts, I give this movie 4 stars.
I agree, 100%.
Now, in a similar vein, our next documentary is another Oscar nominee for Best Feature, documentary feature, and that's called A House Made of Splinters. And this is a movie that will tug at the heart in so many different ways. It will definitely bring a warm smile to your face in some cases, and in other cases, it will just absolutely tragically want to make you cry. It tells the story of an orphanage, a temporary transitionary orphanage located in eastern Ukraine, not too far from the front lines of the Donbass conflict. And it's a place where kids go to when they're sort of awaiting a decision about what their future dispensation is going to be, whether they go back to their parents or they get put into the homes of other relatives or put up for adoption, things like that. It absolutely is just mind-blowing in terms of the effort that the people who run this place go through. And it's also interesting to see the reactions of the kids, because you see the whole spectrum of reactions and responses to what their circumstances are, both in terms of what they see for themselves and how they end up relating to other kids. It's really quite sad to see how many kids have been put in this position in Ukraine, not just because of the war, because actually this was filmed before the Russian-Ukrainian conflict started. But there certainly was impact with the civil war that was going on in eastern Ukraine at the time. But also just a lot of the domestic issues that a lot of the kids in this film had to deal with. Broken families, parents who are dealing with substance abuse, particularly alcohol. And just to see how much the kids are trying to cope with this. And in some cases also just how realistic a perspective they have on their circumstances that you would think that someone that young might not have.
Yeah.
They're really self-aware in terms of what they're up against and what they want to try to do, to get a better life for themselves as they, grow up. This is really an emotional roller coaster in many ways when watching this film. I was a little bit curious to see this film when I first started watching it. I thought, how could they really make a compelling film out of a story like this, for 2 hours? But they did a fine job of it. I mean, absolutely, it pulls you in and keeps you there as all these different stories play out in terms of seeing how these kids are, faring.
Yeah.
And you really have a concern for how they're going to make out ultimately in the long run with what they're up against.
Yeah. And through it all, though, kids are still always kids. They find that moment to be just a child and play and be a kid. Let it all go away for a little bit. Yeah. Very, very sad.
And it does a really good job of addressing those issues all the way around.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to know more what has happened since the war with Russia started. There is a small, brief tagline that's attached at the end saying that they were evacuated because they thought that keeping them there was really going to be too difficult on them.
Yeah.
But we really don't know anything further than that from what the film has to offer. It would be, I would think at some point that a follow-up would be definitely worthwhile to see how the kids fared throughout all this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we could reach out to the directors maybe.
So this is another fine film. It's available for streaming, and I give it another one that I give 4 out of 5 stars.
There you go. All right.
So now changing tracks a little bit, going on to our foreign films. The first one that we have, we'll start with this one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I have?
That's okay. The first one, the Blue Caftan. This is a movie that just absolutely leaves me stunned why this has not received wider attention than it has. This is probably one of the best movies that I've seen, not just last year, but in a number of years. It tells the story of a tailor shop in Morocco that's owned by a husband and wife, and they've developed quite a reputation for their work, so much so that they have a hard time keeping up with the orders. So they bring aboard a young apprentice, to help them out. And the relationship between the apprentice and the tailor shop owner begins to become a little more involved than just professional. For a long time, apparently the husband has had kind of a wandering eye when it came to his
men.
He likes men.
Yeah.
And his wife knows that, but hasn't really said anything. But now that the apprentice is there, it starts to make things a little more complicated than they've had before. And that's also made even more complicated by the fact that she is ill and getting worse. But interestingly enough, she starts to have some revelations about what's going on, to think that, well, if my health declines so far, I really still want my husband to have somebody there for him. And she can see how much the apprentice is willing to help him out. And as the story progresses, how much the apprentice is willing to help her out as well. So you have this beautiful love story develop among these 3 people. And it's just positively gripping in terms of its emotional level. Beautifully filmed, well acted, gorgeous score, beautiful shots of the clothing that they are working on, particularly, as the title implies, a blue caftan. I was really blown away by this when I saw it. It played here in Chicago at the Chicago Film Festival last year, but I didn't get a chance to see it, so I had to wait till it got into distribution. And that wasn't until late February, and it was only in theaters for a week.
Oh my God.
And then disappeared. And I thought, why is this not getting more attention than it is?
I just hate that. I mean, we talk about this all the time, but they're like stupid hours or not enough time to go see it. Like they just, I don't know, like, and yet you'll put some stupid movie in 20 different cinemas at the same time, right? Like, I don't understand it. They, there are people out there that want to see these films. There are, and they should.
Well, and the other thing too is that, I mean, considering the crop of foreign films that got nominated for awards during award season, I mean, there were some good ones there, but this one, to my opinion, was far and away the best. And I'm just astounded that it didn't get more attention than it did.
I saw a comment on YouTube, and it said, "Did I just see Morocco's first gay film?" It was interesting.
Well, it's a very, risky subject.
Oh yeah, especially there.
Coming out of a country like that, especially when it depicts how gay men actually meet other gay men.
Yeah.
In that part of the world. Yeah. It's very clandestine, very hush hush. But I can tell you also, from having had a former partner from that part of the world, it's also a lot more common than most people are aware of. But even though, there's these affairs going on behind the wife's back, you can also tell that there is a very genuine love between the husband and the wife here, just if it isn't even necessarily as physical as she would like,
Yeah.
But I really was just absolutely blown away by this movie. Keep the hankies handy because you will need them. I mean, I was teary-eyed in the theater when I watched this. I absolutely loved it, and I recommend it highly. It's going to be available on home media starting in mid-May.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that streaming will probably come at about the same time. So you might have to wait just a little while before you get a chance to see it. But when you do, I recommend it very highly, and I give it 5 stars.
Woo, 5.
Yeah, I don't give 5s very often, but I do for this one.
All right. Okay, we go to The Quiet Girl.
Yes. Next, we have another film that was nominated for an Oscar. This is from Ireland, called The Quiet Girl. And this is a very simple story set in the early 80s. Tells the story of a young girl who's living with parents who are basically ignoring and neglecting her. And reaches a point where they really just don't feel like dealing with her anymore. So she's shuttled off to live with relatives. And she ends up going through a transformation while living in this new household because she begins to experience love and attention to a degree that she had never really experienced before. What's more, she also helps to fill the void in the household of the relatives in which she's staying because they had suffered a tragedy that they had a hard time recovering from, but her presence there helps them to heal from their circumstances as well. It's beautifully shot. It's got a gorgeous background score. It's well acted. It's interesting in the fact that it's a film that's largely, the dialogue is largely in Gaelic Irish, which is part of the reason why it qualified as an international film. But it's really, fairly simple, and it's got a nice message. It's tender, it's sweet. The one thing that I had a little bit of a problem with, though, is the fact that because this is based essentially on a short work of fiction, a novella, the material is a little thin. And that's really something I can't fault it for. It's just kind of the nature of the way the story that was drawn from was written. So it's a comparatively short film, and it's kind of a little bit on the predictable side. And also, there's a lot of what I would call cinematic padding, a lot of beautiful nature shots and emotive close-ups and things like that. And that's all well and good, but I mean, it doesn't really add all that much to the story beyond what you already get going in. So I wouldn't say it's disappointing by any means. Certainly the messages that come through this are loud and clear and important, but I wouldn't raise it to the level of masterpiece that a lot of viewers and critics have done. So I recommend it, but I'm giving it a little bit of a caution, saying don't be disappointed if you're not blown away by the hype that's been given, because I don't know if it quite rises to that level. But it still is a tender, touching film worth watching, especially on a small screen. I think this is something that really benefits more from a up close and personal, intimate means of viewing than, say, from the big screen. I don't really know that seeing it on a big screen adds all that much to it. So I liked it. It's a debut feature from the director, who's Irish, and I think he's got a lot of potential. Excuse me. But I think this was a kind of a training ground in some ways for him to kind of work out how he wants to put his movies together. So I say, once again, I would recommend it. I would give it 3.5 stars.
Is that a moose or a donkey on your shirt?
It's a moose. Yes, I got this shirt in Maine, so I have one of the Maine mooses on there. So.
Okay, gotcha. That's funny. All right.
Okay. And then our last new film is one that comes from Israel, called Let It Be Morning. And this is another one that's got kind of a curious story behind it. It was made in 2021, and it is just now coming out. I was wondering if the pandemic might have had something to do with the delayed release, but then again, it was filmed after the peak, of the pandemic. So I don't know what the delay was with its release, but in any event, this is an interesting and somewhat complicated story that examines a family wedding in a small Palestinian town in rural Israel. And everybody's having fun and enjoying themselves at the wedding. But when the main character, goes to leave with his family, and he's anxious to get out of there because he's now living in Jerusalem and living a fairly cosmopolitan life. When he gets to the edge of the town, there's a roadblock. And there are Israeli soldiers there basically saying, well, the road's closed. You're going to have to go back to the town. And when he asks how long is this going to be, they can't give him any kind of an answer. So he ends up going back to the town for what he thinks is just going to be the overnight.
Yeah.
But that whole story gets stretched out. And before you know it, they lose cell phone service, and then they lose electricity, and then they lose water, and the grocery shelves begin emptying. And it's almost as if they're trapped within this town with no answer in terms of when they're going to be able to leave. And in many respects, it's sort of a parable for the situation that a lot of the Palestinians face within Israel in terms of the way they're cordoned off into certain segments. So the film is making a definite political statement. But it's interesting also in the fact that when everybody is in this town waiting for the road to open, they're in a position where they've got time on their hands, and they begin reflecting on their own circumstances. And they begin to realize that there are many things going on in their lives individually that have trapped them in a prison almost the same way as the whole community is trapped by this roadblock. So it's a film that deals with the idea of coming to terms with and assessing the prisons that trap us, which, as the film reveals, are also self-made. And the question is, how long and how willing are you to put up with circumstances like that?
There's a funny film too. It's humorous.
Sorry?
There's a bit of humor in this film.
Yeah, that's the other thing is, you would think that given the circumstances, that you would be a place where people would be very embittered by what they're going through. But there's a lot of very gentle, subtle humor and satire that runs through this picture that is not expected at all.
Even the guard's guitar with the peace sign on. I mean, I think he's funny. It's funny.
The other thing I like about this is that it really paints a picture of the Israeli-Palestinian situation that's more detailed than most people, I think, are really aware of outside of Israel. It shows that it's not some monolithic us versus them situation completely. There's a lot of nuances within it in terms of some Palestinians not liking other Palestinians and things like that. And this film brings all that to the surface. So it's a really very telling and revealing picture on a variety of levels, not just in terms of the individual characters and what they're going through, but also the larger society in which they're living. And I really enjoyed it. This was, again, another one that it played here in Chicago for a week, and then just completely vanished. But thankfully, this one is available for streaming now. And it's also available on home media if people want to get a DVD or something like that. I recommend it if you're looking for a movie that works on multiple levels and has a really tremendous amount of substance to it that you wouldn't necessarily think would be there just by getting the initial glimpses of the start of the film. I liked it a lot, and I would give this one 4 stars.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So we've had some really great films,
Yeah.
This month. So go see them. Now, in the recent weeks, I've also been attending the Chicago European Union Film Festival at the Gene Siskel Film Center, and there's some really good films that came out of this one. They're still at the festival level at this point, so maybe a while before you see them, but Then again, some of them, like this one that's just come up on the screen, Exodus, that's a film from Sweden. It just opened in theaters in Sweden like 2 weeks ago, and it's already here, which usually those kinds of transitions don't happen that quickly.
Yeah.
But this is a very tender, charming story that's also got road trip, buddy movie elements to it. It's also got action adventure sequences to it, thriller sequences. Tells the story of a young Syrian girl who's seeking to escape all the trouble going on in her homeland by joining her family, who has gone on ahead to live in Sweden. And on the first leg of her journey, going from Syria to Turkey, as soon as she steps off the shipping container in Turkey, there's a raid by Turkish immigration officials. So she has to run for her life to escape. And she ends up getting in touch with one of the smugglers who helped to arrange all this. And they form a very odd couple, this smuggler and this little kid, in terms of wanting to continue the journey the rest of the way to Sweden. Because she says, well, look, my dad's wealthy. He'll be able to pay you a lot of money. And he buys that. And, off they go. In many ways, this is a film reminiscent of a picture we reviewed last month, The Swimmers.
I'm going to say that. It reminds me of The Swimmers. Yeah.
Yeah, this one is fictional. It's not biographical the way the other one was.
Yeah.
But in many ways, I think this is a better made film. Partly because it's combined so many different elements into one picture, and it's weaved them together so seamlessly that you're never going to be bored by it. I mean, this just keeps your attention, through and through, because it's got, heart-touching emotional moments, and it's got humor, and it's got the action going on with it. I mean, it combines an awful lot of stuff. So given the fact that this has already made it to the festival circuit, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody picks it up here and it becomes available for general release not too far from now. And I would say go see it. This was my favorite film from the festival. Oh. I gave it 4.5 stars.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. That sounds really good.
Next, I think we missed one in between, but we can go back to it.
Which one was it?
Kalev. No, okay.
Stay here. We'll stay at Kalev.
Okay. Kalev, this is a film from Estonia, and this is a sports drama. It tells the efforts of the Estonian national basketball team in their efforts to compete in the last of the Soviet Union national basketball championships. They were an underdog going in, but they had a lot of heart. They believed that they could do it. And it was at the time when the Baltic states, like Estonia, were beginning to pull away from the Soviet Union. So there was a lot of national pride issues on the line as well. In many ways, like a lot of other sports dramas, it's a little bit on the predictable side. I mean, pretty much what's going to happen as the movie's playing out. But the way it's shot, it just, draws you into it. The basketball sequences, you feel like you're in the middle of the game. And that's very hard to do, but it's done very well here. And, it's inspiring, it's motivating, a lot of things that typically come with the underdog sports story type film. I really enjoyed it, and I give this one 3.5 stars.
Okay. All right. So which one did we miss?
I think we missed Fathers and Mothers.
Oh, okay. All right. Hang on.
Is that next on your list, or?
I think it might be. Things got a mixed bit.
No.
Maybe not. No, I must have missed it. I do have it though. So hang on.
Okay.
We can add it.
Well, we can talk about Orchestra.
Okay.
Yeah, Orchestra is a film from Slovenia that tells the story of a local brass band that goes on a tour to rural Austria. And as the tagline says, what happens on tour stays on tour. Well, this is very much a what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas kind of story. It's a collection of interlaced vignettes involving the members of the band. And it also has a sequence where it examines life back in the village where they came from when the group is on tour. It's
there you go.
it features moments of drama. It features moments of humor. It definitely lives up to the what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas sort of idea. And it provides some, prime examples of adults behaving badly as it comes down to it. I enjoyed this one primarily as sort of a guilty pleasure. It's not exactly one of the things where it's going to be inspiring behavior that you want to emulate or anything like that. But it is fun, and it's a good time at the movies. So get a chance to see it, go see it.
Yeah, you should have a good time.
Yeah. Oh, and well, they know how to do it. That's one thing that's for sure. I mean, they bring new meaning to the term "party hardy." I mean,
oh wow, I haven't heard that one for a while.
Yeah. So I give that one 3.5 stars.
Let's make this a little bit. Yeah.
So next we have a film from Denmark called Fathers and Mothers, which is a scathing satire telling the story of a group of parents of kids who attend sort of an elite private school where, the intention is everybody, the kids are all supposed to work at maximizing their potential. But the parents are actually always playing a game of one-upmanship with each other in terms of who's more socially conscious or who's more politically correct. And it ends up that they end up violating all their principles, getting into
Mark, you said?
Yeah, rather nasty little discussions, but they're hilarious. I mean, the things that they're talking about they're a riot. But they're dead serious about, I'm going to show you that I'm more politically correct than you are.
That's so funny coming from that country.
Yeah. And meanwhile, the kids are kind of like sitting there and saying, God, parents, geez. I mean, they can see what's going on with their folks clear as day.
Yeah.
They're not crazy about it, thinking, yeah, okay, this is what I'm supposed to grow up to be like when I'm an adult. The one thing about this film is it's got a lot of characters. And because of that, it's got a lot of story threads in it. So some of them don't feel always as fully fleshed out, maybe as they could be. But they're still very insightful and often very funny, nevertheless. It basically is a picture that kind of sticks a fork in the eye of political correctness when it gets carried too far.
Yeah.
Which is something that I think really needs to be.
It's been happening a bit too much lately.
It needs to have more attention drawn to it. And this is a really good example of, a film that does that. Particularly in the Scandinavian countries, because it's really, so embedded in their culture there, and it's been there even longer than it has been here.
Yeah.
And I think people there are beginning to, tire of it as well. And this movie says, okay, you want us to deflate it? Well, here's a movie that does that. I laughed a lot when I watched this film. It's a little slow to get started, but once it takes off, it's a riot. So I'm hoping that this one is going to get a domestic release as well, and I give it 4 out of 5.
Nice. All right.
And then finally, we've already seen this poster once before, but another film that I saw at the festival was The Quiet Girl. It's sort of been in a dual track release mode right now between being in theaters and being at festivals. So I think it's beginning to near the end of both of those distribution means, and will probably be available for streaming or home media within the next month or so.
Right.
So
just hit on that one more time. There you go, The Quiet Girl.
Yeah.
So now we're going back to the Oscars. And
we got it's time for a quick wrap up on my Oscar scorecard. I'm very proud to say that I landed 5 out of 6 on my predictions. The only one that I missed on was Best Supporting Actress. I picked Angela Bassett, but it went to Jamie Lee Curtis. It's not exactly a result it's not a result that I'm disappointed with. I mean, I would have been very happy with either one of them winning. I actually honestly thought that Angela Bassett had a little more gas in the tank going into this than she did. But the momentum that Jamie Lee Curtis built up in the second half of award season was just a juggernaut. And it carried through into the Oscars, and she took home the prize there. So my ideal result in that particular category would have been a tie, but those happen so very rarely. I think the last one was when Katharine Hepburn and Barbara Streisand tied Back for the Lion and Winter and Funny Girl. But it really these were both terrific performances, and congratulations to both of them for what they did.
Yeah, and crazy that that what won everything. And it's funny because a lot of people who hadn't seen the movie or saw the movie and didn't understand the movie, everything all at once, were just it boggled the mind, I think, a little bit. But
yeah, I was a little surprised that it ended up picking up as much as it did, because there were certain things I knew it was going to get. I was fairly clear it was going to get Best Picture, Director, Actress, and Supporting Actor. But then, picking up the other awards that it got as well. It's a movie that I liked. I can't say I loved it, which would be kind of odd, because considering this is subject matter that I typically gravitate to in such a strong way. But I thought that the movie was a little too long in terms of trying to cover too much ground. And it would have been better off if it had been a little more compact, a little simpler. I'm glad to see that a movie like this has kind of broken ground for the Oscars to be willing to want to recognize a movie with alternate subject matter. But the thing that I found fascinating was that it ultimately, because of everything that it won, it shut out 4 other films from winning anything. Elvis, Tar, The Fabelmans, and the Banshees of Inisherin picked up nothing. And those films had multiple nominations. Usually at the Oscars each year, there's one film that ends up coming up the big loser. But this time you had 4 of them that came away from it empty-handed, which is pretty rare.
Actually.
I would have thought that, for example, the Best Original Screenplay, which went to Everything Everywhere All at Once, everybody had that pegged going in to go to Banshees. And when they called Everything's name, I thought, wow, it's really cleaning up tonight, The one thing I was really very, very happy to see was Brendan Fraser's win.
Me too.
I
love that movie so much. I love that movie.
I love the movie. I loved his performance. There were a lot of people going right up until Oscar night saying, no, it's going to go to Austin Butler for Elvis. And I said, he's picked up a few other things along the way, but I just don't think he's going to beat Fraser when it comes to the Oscars.
No, he did a great job. I'm not going to take anything away from Butler. He did a great job, but he's young and he's got lots more in the tank to come. And Fraser, that was a really outstanding performance, really, when you can't move pretty much, and you just your face.
Well, he obviously poured his heart and soul into the part. And this is the first major role that he's had in a very long time. So, it really was a comeback in the truest sense of the word. And, it was when they called his name on Oscar night, it was just one of those very gratifying moments to me to see the right person winning for the right role. And how much he really appreciated the recognition and just the reception that you saw among the audience that night. That they were as thrilled for him as he was for himself. That was just.
I remember at TIFF, they gave him a standing ovation for that, and he didn't get it. I don't think he really understood, how the enormity of that role was.
No, and at the Venice Film Festival, he got a 10-minute standing ovation when the film ended, and he was just blown away by that, saying, really? You really liked it that much? But I was really happy to see him win. And the thing that I like is, I think this opens the door for him, not just to more movies, especially since he's been kind of absent for a while, but also opens up the door to better movies.
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff that he was doing before he sort of disappeared from the screen was okay.
Zombies 2 or yeah, I mean, like, I think he was pegged for a little bit and now he's not. Now do serious drama. Oh, okay. Let's get him for that.
It's kind of like something comparable to what happened with Michael Keaton a few years ago after he did Birdman.
Mm-hmm.
He was known for doing a lot of these sort of silly comedies and things like that. And then he did something serious, and suddenly he was taken a lot more seriously in terms of the kinds of roles that he could be cast for. And he's been doing work along those lines much more since then. I think you're going to see something similar happen with Brendan Fraser. I mean, I really think that, you're not going to see, Furry Vengeance 2 coming along anytime.
Exactly. Caveman.
Yeah, I had to laugh about that because I was cable surfing the other day, and it was right after he won his Oscar for The Whale, and Furry Vengeance came on the screen. I thought, oh geez, I mean, okay, if you want to do a Brendan Fraser Film Festival, pick something better at least than that. I mean,
yeah. Well, you know what? Like, you'll have to start somewhere. So.
So that brings this year's award season to a conclusion. Yeah. We've got a while before we get to the next one. It'll be interesting to see what comes along over the course of the year.
Yeah, there's some good movies coming up though. I'm really excited to see quite a few of them actually. Yeah.
Yeah, the one that I'm really looking
I'd like to see.
Well, the one that I'm really looking forward to the most, and they've been promoting this in theaters now for a while, is Christopher Nolan's new movie, Oppenheimer, which tells the story of the man who developed the A-bomb, who was a much more complicated character than I think most people are aware of. He wasn't just a warmonger. He wasn't just a weapons designer. He was also a philosopher and somebody who was really troubled by what he was doing when he was doing it and wasn't sure how far we should take this.
Yeah.
So you have a very interesting dynamic in the character that's at work in this particular story. His story has been told a few times before. I don't think a lot of the other movies that have examined Oppenheimer's life have exactly gotten it right to the degree that it needed to be. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with this one. That one's coming out in July. Don't be surprised if you see trailers for it already. I've been seeing trailers in theaters going back as far as last year.
I haven't seen a trailer for it, so that's interesting.
Wow. Yeah. No, they've been it's been plugged since last summer. And that's something that's interesting that happens with a lot of Christopher Nolan's movies is he starts doing promotions for them long in advance of when they're released. I remember when he did Dunkirk a few years ago. The trailers for that came out almost a year ahead of time. Oh. And, a lot of times that's always made me somewhat skeptical because I've always felt if you have to promote something that hard, how good can it be? But Dunkirk lived up to every bit of the hype, and I'm hoping that Oppenheimer will do